Hello, and welcome to CivilNet. Today our guest is Dr. Vahram Ter-Matevosyan. He's a professor of history at the American University of Armenia. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we had a completely different interview planned with you, but just an hour ago, it was announced that Azerbaijani Foreign Minister Bayramov has announced that after years of deliberation, Armenia has accepted the final two outstanding points of a peace or maybe normalization agreement to settle this conflict. This sounds like historic news, but is this really a breakthrough or perhaps another ploy from Azerbaijan?
Paul, I think it's too early to make any conclusive remarks and conclusions overall, because the details are yet to emerge. We don't know many details, and to make statements, to analyze the statements at face value, I think is not enough, and I think it won't help our viewers. But what needs to be addressed is the way it is done, the way it was made, and then how Armenian Ministry of Foreign Affairs seconded. To me, that was a classical example of ownership and owning the entire process, and even the statements that were done, also that the entire negotiation process was conducted according to Azerbaijani interests, and all Azerbaijani interests have been reflected. Of course, it's a classical example of that a winner takes all approach, but it's not the case. So we need to distinguish noise from the real politics and diplomacy. And in this case, it was unfortunate that they couldn't agree to make the statement together. It's a conventional tool in diplomacy. When there is something to break out, then they have to make a statement together. It's a kind of respect. It's a respect towards the counterpart. It's also a standard diplomatic procedure. So the way it was done, it was not very respectful, and you could see some resentment and some reservations in the statement made by Armenia's MFA.
And in fact, it was announced at the Baku Media Forum, which year after year has been a place where Aliyev has bragged about the war, about the ethnic cleansing of Artsakh after that happened. And so the forum itself is even loaded with, it's been anti-Armenian sentiments every single year.
Exactly,
So that's
yes.
another thing that probably, that's not going to be reflected in the main reports about it, but that's a deeper context, which, yeah, you're also very well aware of. So when it comes, another thing that also may be related, may not, but just a day or two ago, the unofficial, probably official Department of Defense of Azerbaijan outlet Caliber reported that we've discovered that Armenia is going to be invading us in April, and something must be done, and then suddenly they go from saying Armenia is about to attack us, which everyone knew was a complete lie, to peace. I mean, so what does this say about the negotiation styles of Azerbaijan and about Armenia?
Look, it is a very interesting question. I hope our time permits us to go a little bit into details. Look, the way Azerbaijan has approached the entire process, and how Armenia has approached the process, is a classical case of entrapment in negotiation literature. This is a case when two cultures, negotiation cultures collide. In the Azerbaijani side, we see how Azerbaijan has resorted to a lengthy process of ambiguous reconnaissance, trying to observe the process, trying to see how Armenia is trying to overcommit during the entire process, whereas Armenia's approach has been, let's tackle the process straight away, let's get it done as soon as possible, because time is of value, and what we have tomorrow may be not there tomorrow and the day after. So that has been one of the striking patterns that one could observe in the negotiation process. The other one is that the Armenian negotiation tactics have remained more or less the same, in line with entrapment theory in diplomacy, and that is, you cannot escape from the commitments, costs, and investments that have been made earlier in the negotiation process. And in Armenia's case, we see that Armenia has sort of entered into a gorge with a wide entrance, and then as it moved in deeper and deeper, the space became narrower and narrower, and Armenia's maneuvering space became more limited. But at the same time, Armenia always had a choice to turn back. But then the gambler instinct kicks in, because a gambler tries to think that, let me try to save what is possible to save in the entire process, well aware that the initial position of Armenia's party was not what it perhaps turned out to be at the end of the day. What is also troubling from observation standpoint is that many issues remain unaddressed in this process. The key question is, what is going to be the fate of Armenians, Artsakh Armenians? How that question is going to be addressed? This is, if we try to build a pyramid of our interests, that question comes first. The other questions relating to the security and safety of a return of Armenians to Artsakh, the questions related to hostages and the sham trial that is going in Baku, the question of Armenia's cultural heritage, the question of transportation routes that Azerbaijan and Turkey will continue to push on in the diplomatic agenda. These questions still remain wide open. Why I'm mentioning this? Because the other thing in entrapment theory is that in order for Armenia to diversify the process, diversify the negotiation profile, is to add new issues to the play. The logic is the following: the greater are the number of issues brought into play, the greater is the number of exit routes when there is a need to escape the negotiation process. So therefore, Armenia's approach has been quite straightforward. Let's get it done. Let's move in. Let's try to do whatever is possible. But you can feel, and later on, I guess, I hope more details will emerge, and we'll try to see what was the reason for the 11th package that Azerbaijan didn't agree. What happened between these two packages that the 12th one was acceptable for Azerbaijan?
That's a very good question. And when you talk about these different exit routes, something that is hovering over all this is, even though Armenia has now apparently agreed to all of the points, all 17 points of this treaty, Azerbaijan has still said the next step in this process is to change the constitution. So it is still reserving this whole big thing. And Armenia is not an autocracy like Azerbaijan. There, they could have a referendum tomorrow on whatever they wanted and it would pass. In Armenia, this referendum, especially looking like it's being shoved upon us by Aliyev, is not going to be very popular, and it's going to need a large amount to pass. So this, again, I mean, what is going to be, what's happening here? This process will take a long time, and it gives, again, a whole lot of room for escape.
Right. So there are a number of ifs that will keep emerging in the coming months and years, perhaps. One of these ifs is when Azerbaijan is going to deoccupy more than 200 square kilometers of Armenia's sovereign territory. That's one of the important questions. Is Azerbaijan going to occupy after all its attachments to the negotiation, to this agreement, are going to be satisfied by Armenia in the process, demarcation, delimitation process, how it is going to play out in the entire process. So perhaps we are too early in our careful, positive approach that we are currently displaying in this interview. Perhaps tomorrow morning we'll wake up with a completely different set of news coming from Baku or from Ankara or from God knows from where. These issues and ifs and whens will keep emerging in the coming months. Why this is an issue? Because there's a matter of confidence. Because in any negotiations to succeed, you need to have confidence. Confidence building measures are yet to be finalized. Why these negotiations are also somehow weird from academic standpoint, because signing documents, finalizing documents is one thing. Signing them is another thing. Implementing them is a completely different thing. So you need completely different set of skills, and investments in order to move ahead and bring the promised peace that the nations in this troubled region seek so fervently. So therefore, one of the things that we need to be aware and constantly ask the government is a list of questions that Armenia has to constantly keep on its agenda. Never give up on these points, because let's say if you go our MFA's website, the impressions are rather mixed impressions. That if you try to do your research based on MFA's resources, if you go and see how Armenian ambassadors abroad conduct their daily business, you don't see very often about the kind of issues that Armenian citizens, society wants to be heard and raised in different capitals around the world. You don't hear about hostages. You don't see about ethnic cleansing of Armenians. You don't see about the occupation of Armenia's sovereign territory. And one may wonder why this has been done in order not to endanger the process of negotiations, or it was a deliberate choice that only the minister, the prime minister, will speak about these very sensitive issues. So this is a question that needs to be addressed and constantly raised by reporters in Armenia.
Well, and the thing that I think about is, okay, the government said we're going to leave those issues like the prisoners and right of return for later. But the thing is, Armenia really doesn't have much leverage now, but once you've made the agreements, don't you have even less leverage? So is there, what could the method be that the Armenian government could down the line now say, all right, now right of return, now let the prisoners go? What's that?
Yeah, that's a valid question. And hopefully sooner than later, the government, the prime minister and foreign minister, diplomats will clarify for the society, because we are puzzled on many levels. The way it was done, the way it was delivered, why Armenian MFA was surprised. So all these questions need answers, and we need to, and these particular questions are valid questions, and the government needs to have answers to these questions.
Well, thank you so much for that. I know there's so much that we still don't know, but your analysis was really great, and we're going to have to see where this all goes. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Bob, for having me. Yes.
And thank you for joining CivilNet.